I never expected that evening to take the turn it did. The city hummed quietly outside, its lights flickering in the distance, but inside my little apartment, the silence pressed against me like a weight. I had spent the day in the usual blur of work, calls, and the restless scroll of my phone, yet something about that ordinary routine made me feel empty. It started with a message I almost ignored. His name was new to me, though I had noticed him around before, a presence that seemed to linger at the edges of my awareness. There was something magnetic about him, the way he carried himself with calm assurance, a quiet confidence that drew attention without demanding it. The message was simple, an invitation to meet, just the two of us, at a hotel lounge he liked. I stared at my screen for minutes, a mix of hesitation and curiosity fighting inside me. I shouldn't go, I knew better. There were boundaries, commitments, and the silent rules I had always lived by. And yet, there was a thrill in the idea, a whisper that maybe, just for a night, I could step outside the life I had meticulously built. When I arrived, he was already there, leaning casually against the polished wood of the lobby counter. His smile was easy, unforced, and it carried a warmth that made me forget the caution that usually guided me. He greeted me, not with grand gestures, but with a simple nod and the kind of calm gaze that seemed to read more than just appearances. The lounge was quiet, bathed in amber light that softened the edges of the room. We spoke at first in cautious pleasantries, the kind of polite conversation that feels like testing the waters. But soon, the words flowed more freely. His laughter was low and rich, filling the space around us in a way that made it feel smaller, more intimate. I found myself leaning slightly closer, drawn in by the rhythm of his voice, the careful way he listened, and the subtle glances that lingered just long enough to unsettle me. I noticed the way he observed the world, with curiosity and calm amusement. It mirrored the thoughts I often kept hidden, the questions I didn't dare ask aloud. The conversation moved seamlessly from trivialities to fragments of his life, glimpses of his experiences, his dreams, and the moments that shaped him. Each revelation made the ordinary feel charged with a new intensity, as though time itself had slowed just for us. I knew it was dangerous, this pull I felt, but I couldn't resist the subtle electricity that danced between us. A gesture as small as his hand brushing against mine sent shivers down my spine. I reminded myself to stay composed, to maintain the distance my mind insisted upon, but my heart betrayed me. I wanted this night to stretch endlessly, even as a small voice whispered warnings I tried to ignore. When he suggested moving to a quieter room in the hotel, just to sit a while longer, I hesitated only for a heartbeat. The decision felt reckless, yet there was an undeniable allure in stepping into a space that belonged to no one else. The corridor was dimly lit, and the air held a quiet anticipation. With every step, the tension grew, a mixture of excitement, fear, and the intoxicating thrill of the unknown. As the door closed softly behind us, the world outside ceased to exist. The room smelled faintly of polished wood and something richer, warmer that I couldn't place. We didn't need words immediately. The silence itself seemed to hum with possibilities, each one more dangerous than the last. I was acutely aware of him, the presence, the warmth, the way he moved with effortless grace. For a moment, I allowed myself to forget the rules, to forget the life waiting for me beyond these walls. All that existed was the quiet closeness, the unspoken connection, and the dangerous spark that promised a night unlike any I had known before. The room seemed to shrink around us, not physically, but in the way the air thickened with unspoken possibility. I sank into the chair by the window, my thoughts spinning faster than the city lights outside. He didn't sit immediately, instead letting the moment stretch, watching me with a patience that both unnerved and intrigued me. "Do you always get lost in thought this easily?" he asked softly, and I felt the warmth in his voice curl around me, wrapping me in a strange comfort. I laughed lightly, though it sounded hollow even to my own ears. "Perhaps," I said, unsure why I admitted even that much. There was a strange vulnerability in his gaze, one that invited honesty without forcing it. Slowly, he took a seat opposite me, the distance between us narrowing almost imperceptibly. We spoke less now, letting the quiet fill the room with a strange tension that was almost tangible. I noticed the subtle gestures, the way he reached for his glass, the tilt of his head when he studied my expression, the small, almost unconscious ways we leaned toward each other. Each movement felt deliberate yet effortless, a dance neither of us had rehearsed but both of us instinctively knew. I tried to focus on something ordinary, the flicker of the streetlights outside, the faint hum of the city, the pattern of shadows across the floor. But my attention kept returning to him. There was a pull, subtle but undeniable, that drew me closer, a gravitational force I hadn't anticipated. "You're quiet," he said after a long pause, his tone soft but teasing. I looked up, caught in the depth of his gaze, and felt an unexpected warmth creep up my neck. I liked the quiet, I confessed, surprised at my own boldness. It was true, I liked how this quiet allowed us to exist in a space separate from the world, a bubble where nothing mattered except this strange connection between us. He smiled then, the kind of smile that seemed to acknowledge both the tension and the understanding between us. "I think there's more to you than most people see," he said. The words weren't heavy, but they carried weight, a recognition that stirred something inside me. Time slipped by unnoticed. We spoke of dreams, of fears, of fleeting moments that had left their mark on our lives. With each shared thought, the room seemed warmer, closer, more intimate. I became acutely aware of every small movement, every glance that lingered longer than necessary, every subtle brush of our hands against the same surface. At some point, he reached out, a simple gesture, but the electricity it carried was undeniable. I didn't pull away. Instead, I let my hand hover near his, feeling the warmth of his skin without crossing the boundary completely. The tension was unbearable and intoxicating all at once. I started, but he held up a finger, gentle, patient, as though he could sense my internal conflict without me needing to speak it. "I know," he murmured. "We don't have to rush. We can just be here, like this, for a while." Quote. And so we did. Time became irrelevant. The conversation dwindled into silence, and yet silence itself felt alive. I could feel the energy between us, a pulse that seemed to sync with my own heartbeat. Every glance, every subtle movement, was a language only we understood. There was a moment when I closed my eyes briefly, letting the warmth of his presence wash over me. For a fleeting second, I forgot the world outside, the expectations, the guilt, the morality I had always clung to. There was only this night, this closeness, this unspoken promise of something more. When the first hint of dawn crept through the window, I felt a pang of reality returning. The spell of the night had been intoxicating, but now it demanded reflection. I shifted slightly, aware of him beside me, and realized with startling clarity how deeply I had allowed myself to be drawn in, even without a single word spoken about what might come next. The tension lingered, heavy yet thrilling, and I knew that once we left this room, nothing would be quite the same. The night had opened a door I wasn't sure I could close, and I wasn't certain I wanted to. The morning light was harsh, slicing through the curtains and forcing reality into the room. The night's warmth and intimacy lingered like a fading perfume, but with it came the weight I had been trying to ignore. I sat on the edge of the bed, tracing patterns on the sheets, wondering how I had allowed myself to sink so completely into a moment that wasn't meant to last. He moved quietly, giving me space as I wrestled with the jumble of emotions, exhilaration, guilt, and a strange sense of anticipation all at once. We didn't speak immediately, and perhaps that was for the best. Words would only anchor the moment to reality, shatter the fragile illusion we had created. Yet, the silence between us was different now, charged, expectant, impossible to ignore. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, almost hesitant. "You're thinking about leaving," he said, as though he could see straight into my conflicted mind. I didn't answer, not right away. How could I explain the turmoil, the mix of desire and apprehension that made every heartbeat both thrilling and painful? I knew the world outside this hotel room would not understand. My choices, my actions, would be judged, dissected, criticized. And yet, the pull of that night, the connection we had shared, tugged at me relentlessly. I couldn't deny it. I didn't want to. There was a part of me that ached for more, even as I knew more could bring heartbreak or regret. We lingered near the window, watching the city come alive beneath us. The streets, the cars, the people hurrying by, they were all part of a reality I had stepped out of, if only for a few hours. His hand brushed mine lightly, and in that simple gesture, I felt the weight of everything we had shared. The intimacy was both beautiful and terrifying, a reminder of how deeply I had let myself be entangled in someone else's world. Messages began to pop up on my phone, texts from someone waiting, someone who expected me to be present, responsible, the person I had always been. Guilt prickled at my skin, a reminder that this fleeting romance existed in secret, hidden beneath layers of lies and half-truths. I stared at the screen, torn between responding to the outside world and staying in this cocoon of forbidden connection. He noticed my hesitation and offered no judgment, only understanding. "We don't have to figure everything out right now," he said softly. "This night, it's ours, if you let it be." His words were comforting, yet they carried an undeniable truth. The consequences were real, whether we acknowledged them or not. I realized then that the thrill of the night was intertwined with risk. Every choice I made carried weight. The memory of his laughter, the brush of his hand, the way he had looked at me as though I were the only person in the world, all of it was intoxicating, yet it existed in a delicate balance with reality. One wrong step, one miscalculation, and the spell could shatter. We shared a quiet breakfast, the kind where words were unnecessary. Each bite, each sip, was a reminder of the night we had spent together, a fleeting sanctuary of connection in a world that demanded conformity and restraint. I could feel the pull to prolong it, to stay just a little longer, yet I also sensed the inevitability of leaving. When the time came to part, I hesitated. The thought of stepping back into my life, into obligations and expectations, was painful. And yet, I understood that some experiences were meant to exist only in fragments, brief interludes that leave their mark but do not define the entirety of one's story. As I stepped into the elevator, leaving the hotel behind, I carried with me the memory of warmth, closeness, and a connection that was as exhilarating as it was forbidden. My heart raced, my mind whirled, and I knew that the night had changed something fundamental within me. I was no longer entirely the same person who had walked in hours before. There was a shadow of desire, a whisper of risk, and a lingering question about what could, or should, come next. The days that followed felt strangely heavy, as if the night at the hotel had left an invisible weight pressing down on me. I went about my routines, smiled at colleagues, answered calls, and maintained the illusion of normalcy, but beneath it all, a quiet storm raged. Every thought of him, his voice, his laughter, the subtle warmth of his presence, pulled at me, reminding me of the fragility of what we had shared. Messages from him appeared at odd moments, simple greetings or fleeting questions that made my heart skip a beat. Each notification brought a rush of excitement and a stab of guilt. I couldn't let myself indulge too deeply, yet I found my thoughts drifting back to him again and again. It was an intoxicating tension, the kind that leaves you both exhilarated and unsettled. I began to reflect on the choices I had made, and the reality of my situation became impossible to ignore. The night had been thrilling, a glimpse into a world I had never dared to explore. And yet, it had consequences, unspoken, lingering, and unavoidable. I realized that desire was a dangerous thing, capable of stirring feelings that logic and morality struggled to contain. I caught myself replaying moments over and over, the way he had looked at me when no one else was watching, the quiet intimacy of shared laughter, the subtle brush of hands that had sent shivers down my spine. Each memory was vivid, but it carried with it the bitter reminder that such moments were fleeting. What we had was suspended in time, a delicate bubble that could not last beyond the night. When I finally allowed myself to reach out to him, it was with caution. Our messages were careful, measured, testing boundaries without overstepping them. Even as I typed, I could feel the pull of temptation, the thrill of connection balanced against the whisper of restraint. We spoke of simple things, books, music, small details of our days, but beneath it all lay the invisible thread of the night we had shared. I began to understand something fundamental about myself, that passion and desire were not inherently wrong, but they existed within a context that demanded responsibility and awareness. I could savor the memory of what had been, allow it to shape me in subtle ways, and still navigate my life without losing myself entirely. The memory of him lingered, but so did clarity. I realized that our encounter had been a mirror, reflecting parts of myself I had ignored, longings, curiosities, and the courage to step beyond my comfort zone. And in that reflection, I found a strange peace. I would carry the night with me, a reminder of both danger and beauty, of choices made and lessons learned. As I walked through the city streets one evening, the lights casting long shadows across the pavement, I felt a quiet smile curve on my lips. I didn't know if I would see him again, or if the thread connecting us would fade into memory. But I understood now that some moments are meant to exist exactly as they do, perfect, intense, and fleeting. I had changed. Not dramatically, not in a way that would shock anyone who knew me, but subtly, in the way a single night can alter perception, awaken desire, and illuminate parts of the heart that had been sleeping. And though the city around me was busy, loud, and indifferent, I carried the warmth of that night with me, a secret, a thrill, a memory that was mine alone. The choice to leave the hotel and return to the world was mine, but so was the right to remember, to feel, and to grow from what had passed. And somewhere, in the quiet corners of my mind, I wondered if he too carried the memory, the spark, the silent acknowledgement of a night that had been impossibly ours.